Right on.
So, Jeff, we got to the point where you were sat there, nobody's looking at you, and you've got $10,000 on you. You've also got your laptop, and you're thinking about making a run for it. What happened next?
Well, I made a run for it. It started out slow as a slow walk. I was looking over my shoulder. And eventually I kept on getting further and further away, and I got far enough away, and it was clear that nobody was watching me. And I started booking it into the desert and around the island of trees, and ran for quite a while, and then eventually heard some shots being fired and a Hummer rolling up behind me, and got tackled into the sand, and then dragged in and interrogated for a little bit, and then finally shipped off to the closest jail, and then eventually into the prison that I would spend the better part of the next couple of years in.
And you said that originally you were sentenced to 10 years, but it was only 2.5. Is there some sort of amnesty or something that made you get an earlier release?
There, and the first lawyer that I had was telling me that I laughed at him because I thought he was joking, and turns out he wasn't joking. And I refused to believe that I was going to be there for 10 to 25 years. And so I just started, I started working with that lawyer. That lawyer disappeared in a mysterious car accident. I had another lawyer. He disappeared off the face of the earth, and really just studied what other people were doing. And for a lot of people weren't getting out and were ending up doing their whole sentence. And there was a few that did get out, and so I really studied what they did, and got the one lawyer that I thought would be able to get me out, and in the end he had to really move heaven and earth to do that, but he was able to get me out.
So you're finally released. What are you doing now? Are you heading straight back to Canada, as far away from Mexico as you can go?
Well, I was delivered back to Canada,
Right.
and so I arrived back in Victoria, British Columbia, and yeah, it really was just trying to figure my way out back into the world, and decided to start working as a medic, and worked on a medic in the oil rigs in northern Canada, and eventually did my paramedic training and started working for the BC ambulance service, and really just stayed with my practice through that whole time. And the whole time that I was in prison, that was an incredible lifeline, and then reintegrating back into society, it was equally as important to have that practice to try and reintegrate into what we call the real world,
Yeah.
and get my feet back on the ground. And
How
so
did you
it's
how did you find doing that? Because you've got a life that there was, you had a restaurant. You'd obviously everything that's going on in Mexico. You're kind of like chasing things, and then you reintegrate. And had you decided this is what I'm going to do, or was there always a chance you could go back to that, or was that never going to happen?
it felt like when I got out that I was definitely never going back to that. I felt like I had learned the lessons that I needed to learn during that time, and felt like I was very much on a clear path, and had a clean slate coming back to Canada, and an opportunity just to start fresh. And so the paramedic work was good for that, and it was it was kind of a way to be working in society in a way that felt good to me, but not
Yeah.
to be too integrated into society. And I worked at that for quite a few years, really just establishing myself in the world again and building up some resources and eventually got to a point where I realized that I could really start to pursue my dreams again. And that was a time when breath work was really emerging, not just as a modality within the spiritual space, but as a tool that had a lot of scientific backing to show its efficacy and how practical it was. And deepening my own connection to my breath had been such a powerful piece in my own journey and my own healing that I was fascinated to learn more. And I just felt like I wanted to learn as much as I could about breathing and nervous system. And so that led me on a path of traveling around the world and learning from some of the best known names in that world, and also really saw an opportunity in that. It was very early on in that space, and there was a lot of segmentation in that space. And I think as a kid, I was always that kid that always wanted to know why and why
Yeah.
and why more. And so there was pieces that weren't making sense to me. It was like, well, there needs to be a connection between A and B, and what are these threads that run through all of these different modalities of breath work, and what's actually going on in the body, and how does that actually relate to the nervous system. And so that was my mission for quite a few years, was to try and weave those threads together and really put this whole bring this whole modality to people in a way that was really practical and easy to understand. At that point, it was, there's little bits of information here and a little bit there, but it didn't
Yeah.
really make sense. And I wanted it to be practical for people. So that's where it really started, and started working and doing workshops and retreats, and started doing online courses. And eventually that led to training other people to do what I do. And yeah, it's been an incredible journey and a continual refinement of the way that I share and the way that I communicate, and continually trying to distill how can I communicate the most valuable information to people in the simplest, easiest to understand way. And so for me, the breath and the nervous system is such a huge part of everything. It doesn't matter where people are starting from. For me, that's foundational. And so I kind of wrap that into one of three pillars that I work with now.
Okay.
And the first one being radical ownership, second one being self-mastery, and then the third one is really becoming a conscious creator in our life.
What's radical ownership?
Radical ownership for me is all about having the courage to rewrite the story of our life, and to recognize that we've actually been writing the script all the way
Yeah.
along.
Yeah.
And we can make decisions unconsciously.
Yeah.
I believe that we make decisions on a soul level before we even come here. So we technically, some of what we experience in our life may technically not be our fault. But from my perspective, everything that we're experiencing is our own creation. And so for me, radical ownership is to accept that responsibility. And within accepting that responsibility, really reclaiming our creative potential and the ability to make choices and decisions based on what we're experiencing to create a different future and rewrite that story of our life. And you, people love to blame other people, their
Yeah,
upbringing, their parents, their ex, their job, their circumstances. And I recognize that somebody listening might be in a really challenging circumstance. And yet, the only way that we can truly change those circumstances is just to take responsibility for where we're
yeah,
at,
yeah,
to observe where we're at, to be super honest about it. And it's a prerequisite to being able to move ourselves in the direction that we want to go. And I always say, if we're not honest about where we're at, then how are we ever going to get where we want to go?
yeah,
It's like looking on a map and pretending that I'm in London while I'm sitting in Revelstoke, BC, Canada. It's
yeah,
like if I want to get to Germany and, you just can't figure it out. So it's like you just got to be honest about where you're starting from. And then you can make those decisions that will lead us where we want to go in life. And if we don't do that, we just end up running into the same walls of frustration and stress and confusion and helplessness, and we wonder why nothing changes.
yeah.
And the only way is to take radical ownership and say, this is where I'm at. I'm creating it all, to start to understand the tricks of our own mind, understand the nature of reality, that that what I'm experiencing is a reflection of my own mind. And when we understand that, we can start to do some of the deep inner work that we need to do in order to shift our belief systems, to be able to heal some of the unhealed wounding that's leading to the projections that we're experiencing in our lives.
I totally agree with everything that you said there. It makes perfect sense. And just listening to what you're saying, I know from perfect personal experience with some of the things where I've been wronged and it's not my fault. And I was unlucky and I didn't deserve that. I know there's a percentage there that was my own doing, that I could have dealt with it better. I buried my head. The list goes on. So taking
Mhm.
accountability and going, you know what, even though somebody's done that to me, am I to blame on that? And I'll be honest, every single time, pretty much, yeah, that's my fault. I could have done this, I could have done that better. Would you say the radical ownership is the hardest part for somebody to overcome, get through, be honest with themselves?
I think it can be one of the hardest pieces for people to accept because it can be so deeply challenging to have that recognition that, holy shit, like I'm creating all of this, and I can tell a story that, might help people to understand my journey with that. And
Yeah.
20 years ago, before I left for Mexico, I was in one of my houses in Revelstoke, and I was strung out on OxyContin and cocaine. And I'm running around the house. I'm peeking through the blinds, and I'm convinced that the world's out to get me. And I'm talking to my best friend Harley on the phone, and he says to me, he says, "I'm coming to get you. You're coming with me to get clean. I'm on my way to get you." And I'm just like, no way, man. Like I got to get out of here. There's people after me. I don't know where I'm going, but I got to get far, far away. And he's just like, I'm coming to get you. Stay where you are. I'm a couple hours away. I'm on my way now. Just calm down. You're going to make things worse. And there is something there I just couldn't, it didn't make sense to me because Harley was a drug dealer. He was a boss, so his whole house is covered in drugs. And so there's kind of like this small voice inside me that's telling me, don't go, so I tell him, don't come. I'm not going with you. Stay away from me. I don't know where I'm going, but I got to get out of here, get out of the country, get far, far away. And before he hangs up the phone, he says to me, well, if you go far, far away and everything stays the same, you'll know it was you. So a year and a half later, I'm in Mazatlan, Mexico. Like I've taken off, I've driven through Canada, through the US. It's like an 8,000 kilometer journey that I took to get to Mazatlan. Nobody knows where I am, nobody knows who I am there. I haven't talked to friends or family since I left. And same thing. I'm in my fifth wheel trailer, it's parked in an RV park on the beach in Mazatlan, and I'm running around, strung out on crack and peeking through the blinds. I'm convinced that the cops or the cartel are out to get me. Somebody, like something's going to happen, and I walk past the mirror and I see myself in the mirror. And, I look at myself and I'm skinny. My eyes are, just sunken into my skull. And Harley's words are just echoing in my mind. It's like, you'll know it was you. And for me, that was the moment of just
Um,
recognizing it's like there's nowhere else to go. There's no one else to blame. The only thing I could do at that point was just take radical ownership for all of it and say, okay, yeah, it's me. And that's what I did, and everything changed.
yeah. Just a quick question before, because I really want to know about the change. I'm fascinated about the change. When you looked in that mirror, and I've had another guest come on that had addictions, and he said it was like going through a mouse going through a maze, and in the end, you run out of places to go, and all you've got is a mirror in front of you.
Mhm.
Literally, that was the case for you. Did like the feeling just go through you when you realised that this is where you're at and you had to change, or did you think, yeah, you know what, I've got to change this? So, how were you feeling when that moment came?
Oh, it felt crushing, like the weight of really embracing that truth is, just felt crushing. And, it's like I had run and I had blamed, and had pointed fingers, at my parents, my upbringing, the accidents I'd been in, like I wanted it to be anything else other than taking ownership and admitting that, what, it's like, this is all me. And it's all the way that I'm seeing life. It's all my own stories. It's all, my own beliefs. And I'm the only one that's holding myself back from living a good life, and it felt devastating to just finally admit that, and I think it's like the more that we run from that, it kind of like just creates this momentum almost that's like pushing us in our lives, like away from looking at ourselves. And it's just like it gets harder and harder because we're building this life of lies, and then eventually at some point it just, we have to face it. And in that one decision and taking ownership for it, then we reclaim the potential to change everything.
What was the first thing you did after looking in the mirror, realizing that I've got to change and now's the time? What was the first thing you did in order to start that change?
Yoga was a huge part of that. Yoga, meditation, and breath work were my lifeline. And, I met a woman that pulled into the RV park beside us there, and she was with her boyfriend, and she invited me to go to a yoga class one day. And I went to yoga, and I, there was a part of me that that really wanted to change,
Yeah.
but the actual looking at my own shit and admitting that it was me, that was a different part. But in doing that, there was a part that was eager to change, that was sick of living that life and, just wanted to create a new life. So I dove into yoga and meditation and breath work, and that really became my lifeline, and and I think in many ways became my new addiction. And I think we do that with different practices
Yeah.
that help us, is they do become an addiction in a way. But the way I look at it, it's all about harm reduction. And if we can get hooked on yoga after being hooked on crack and
Yeah.
Oxycontin, then like great. We can
Yeah.
work on the yoga later.
Yeah. No, yeah, without doubt. How long into like what your rehabilitation would you say did you realize, yeah, I think I'm changing, my life's changing, I'm feeling better, I'm getting further away from my past? How long do you think? Because I'd imagine, listen to yourself, that you're somebody that just threw yourself into everything.
Yeah, it was quick.
Yeah.
Like there was a lot of moments of questioning, and
Yeah.
yet there was starting to be a lot of evidence that, wow, this is possible, a new life is possible. And I think when we're in those initial stages, and and for me, those first few years between getting clean, diving into yoga, and going to jail, there was a lot of back and forth, because the way I see it, it's kind of like, it's like almost like the addiction is like you're throwing like a big stone in a pond. Your mind is so negative, and you're just sending out these ripples of negative thought and negative belief. And I have a belief that it takes some time for those ripples to settle down and for the water to calm.
Yeah.
And so
Definitely.
you're dealing with those ripples of past decisions, old belief systems, and it can be challenging. And yet there was an awareness. It's like, yeah, things are definitely changing, and I think that they can get better. And so it was very, very quick. And within 6 or 8 months of getting clean, I opened a restaurant in Mazatlan, and
Yeah.
I opened a restaurant, a year after starting to practice yoga. My yoga teacher wanted me to take over yoga classes, so I started teaching yoga, and it was very quick. But those underlying belief systems were
Yeah.
still there, and
Yeah.
those are what take, I'm still working through them. I think we spend a lifetime
You never go.
really getting to the more subtle and subtle layers of our beliefs. And so even though I was trying really hard, I'd really dug myself into a hole on my way down to Mexico.
Yeah.
And in terms of severing myself from past life, family, friends, as a white guy in a foreign country with no lifelines, and eventually ran out of money and felt like it ran out of options. And so I made the choice to work for the cartel. But
Yeah.
thank God I had all those tools with me when I landed in jail.
Yeah. I think so, without doubt.
Yeah.
And so you moved back to, obviously, come up to it was a British Columbia you moved back to.
Yeah.
Yeah. And did you feel at home then, especially when you were working on yourself, you're starting to overcome as best as you can the negative belief systems? Did you start, you're not looking out the window anymore? Did you start feel, I mean, what about like also connection with friends and family? How did that all happen again?
Yeah, it was a gradual process. And I think justifiably so, a lot of people were a little bit hesitant to let
Yeah.
me back into their lives. And so really, I felt quite alone coming back, and was okay with that. you know, I felt like at that point, based on everything that I'd gone through, having had that experience in prison, getting out early, you know, I was on a mission and and I didn't really care, you know, who was ready to accept me back in their lives, who wasn't. You know, there's some friends that have been there the whole way along
Hmm.
and, you know, never cared. You know, it didn't bother them. They're curious what happened, you know. But you know, I think at some point in our life, we just got to make it work ourselves, you know, and I was on a mission to do that and to just get my feet back on the ground. I knew how much these tools that had brought me out of addiction had gotten me through that incarceration, had got allowed me to focus my mind in the mayhem that those 2 years were, find a way out of that and get my feet back on the ground. There was such a strong connection to those practices and a deep knowing that these can help a lot of people. And so I just was very focused on that mission. And, you know, and some people came back into my life. Some people, you know, just still haven't and
Yeah.
probably never will. And that's okay. That's their choice. And I'm here doing my thing and now interestingly enough, I'm back in my hometown that I left 20 years ago when I was peeking out through the blinds and
Yeah.
just couldn't be happier to be back here.
Yeah.
And it's a
How,
real full circle journey.
yeah. How does that world look now? Looking at where you are now, 20 years later, to peeking out of the
Yeah.
blinds, paranoid. I mean, do you ever reflect? I guess you must do a lot of reflection at times.
Yeah, I do a lot of reflection. What I don't do is a lot of comparison,
Yeah.
you know, comparing where I was at that point. You know, 25 years ago, you know, I was wearing this facade of being successful by societal standards and, you know,
Yeah.
had a bunch of houses and, you know, it was a completely different life. And now I'm back. I'm living a much simpler life and I'm infinitely more happy. And from my perspective at this point, the world is full of possibility and potential. And I'm not in a rush. You know, I can see that it's things unfold one step at a time. I'm
Yeah.
so grateful for everything that I have and grateful to be where I am. So everything feels perfect.
You don't sound like a guy in a rush. You're going to go at your own pace and you're not rushing for anyone. Whereas somebody like me is like, right, we need to get this done and I need this. And then, oh God, no. But you just seem to go at your pace and that's fine. That's what works for you. Is that just your personality or is it something that you've worked on to go at that pace? Is it because you're Canadian? Everyone's chilled? I don't know.
I would say I've worked on it a lot
Yeah.
and I think just have gotten to a point where I recognize that the rushing and the pushing and the forcing has just not served me in the past. It did in the way that it pushed me in the direction I thought I wanted to go, but in the end that wasn't where I wanted to go anyways. You know, I hadn't really stopped to be able to be grounded in thinking about what do I want my life to look like, but maybe more than that, what do I want my life to feel like?
Yeah.
And I don't want to feel stressed and pushed and like I'm forcing and trying to make things happen anymore. I want to find a natural flow and feel grounded and feel joy filled and just be happy and grateful and enjoy what's right in front of me. And you know, and it's I think a lot of us can go through a lot of hardship before we get to a point that we recognize that I just want to feel good.
Yeah.
And a lot of that for me really ties into that pillar of self-mastery and really developing that relationship with the nervous system and recognizing when my nervous system is happy, I'm happy, I feel good, and I don't need a lot in my life. You know,
What would you say you don't need? Because there'd be people listening to this and they'd be fascinated because they're like, this guy probably doesn't get stressed in a million years. Nothing's going to stress this guy. The work you've put in, the way your perspective on world. How do you get to that point?
a lot of work, a lot
Consistent.
of a
Yeah.
lot of sitting with myself, a lot of taking ownership for what's happening in my life. Why am I in a stressful situation?
It's a good
Is
question.
a good first question.
Great
That's
question.
that's the radical ownership piece. The
Right.
second piece is, okay, what is my nervous system telling me? Like, why am I feeling this stress? What's happening in my body? How do I start to unwind that so I don't feel these stressful responses all the time that are, where I'm feeling that stress. And maybe, after a stressful experience, people listening can probably, you know, recognize sometimes it's 2, 4, 6 hours, sometimes still the next day you might feel like you're
Oh,
still kind of like off kilter or off center. And so just really doing that deep inner work on all levels, the physical with the breath, with the nervous system, but also like diving into the emotional patterns, really diving into the mental patterns, the belief systems, and just unwinding all of those pieces. And I certainly have not always been calm
no.
and at peace. And it's been something that I've focused on. And I'm grateful I have because, to be honest, it's the only thing that at this point I really think is meaningful is our own peace of mind, is just to be relaxed and at peace with life is the greatest gift.
Yeah, it is because you can have everybody and everything, and if you're not got peace of mind, it doesn't matter. And I explain that to a lot of my clients where you get I say like you get like a singer like a Kurt Cobain. They've reached the end of the rainbow and they're still unhappy. They still haven't dealt with what's going on there. So where you've got that inner peace now, what things do you think that you no longer need in life? Some people, it might be a fast car, it might be a big house, material things. What are the things that you think? Yeah, I live a simple life. Those things there, I don't need them anymore. I've evolved past them.
Well, I think definitely the things that you've named, and it doesn't mean that a fast car is a bad thing,
No,
but
but then
but
you
for what
stand.
purpose do you have it? Are you a race car driver? Or
Yeah,
you know, or maybe that really is your thing.
yeah,
And you really, really, really love fast cars and you love
sure.
to work on them, and that's a huge part of your life. Well, then cool.
Yeah,
Maybe you've got a big family and that's why you need a big house. But
yeah,
but I'm a single guy, and
yeah,
so I don't need a lot. So to me, it's about how simple can I make my life? Because everything that we have that's in excess is really just becomes a drag within the system.
yeah,
And it's something else to take care of. It's another responsibility. It's another concern. It's another worry in our mind. And so, how simply can I live? And how much pleasure can I just derive from simple things? Sitting out in nature, sitting and reading a book, like we can get a lot of pleasure from doing simple things, having a good conversation with a friend. Well,
yeah,
those are all pretty simple and inexpensive things. But oftentimes we can get confused in our mind and think that, well, I'm going to be happy if I get this thing, or if I
Yeah,
get that thing, or if I have that thing that my other buddy has, then, and they don't bring us peace and happiness because we're not peaceful and happy inside to begin with.
yeah,
So why not focus on being peaceful and happy? And then oftentimes we find that actually I don't need all this other stuff. I don't want it because I'm happy.
yeah. Yeah, and it's so simple, and it makes perfect sense. And you're saying about the things that you get so much from. They're the things that I like the most. I like sort of quiet time. I want to sit there reading the book. I want simple things there as well. That's what I get the most out for. Anything sort of complicated, I find it stressful. I find it stressful.
Mm.
Um, but often it's people's egos, the world we live in, to try and simplify their life and end up overcomplicating it, and they just get so stressed.
Yeah, well, and I think it's a stage of our evolution
Yeah,
is in being able to work through egoic consciousness and come towards a more heart-based consciousness. Those are important steps and lessons for us to learn. Is that wow, these fleeting desires of my ego actually don't satisfy me. But I can't know that until I go through the process of recognizing that they didn't bring me satisfaction. And so we need to learn from our experiences. And, instead of going around the track over and over and over again, it's kind of like, okay, yeah, I see that this is not working for me. And actually there must be something else that maybe I'm not seeing that will bring me the satisfaction that I was looking for all along. And at some point maybe we find, well, actually it's right here, right now. And I'm either peaceful, satisfied, and happy, or I'm not. And it happens in this present moment.
with a lot of people out there that are listening, they're going to be stressed, and it might be their relationship, it might be their job there. What would you sort of say to people like that? Just take stock of where you're at, try and figure out why you're stressed. Is it something you need to change?
Well, I would say the first thing to do is just stop and feel, and just feel what you're feeling.
Yeah,
And to recognize when we feel stressed, that's a signal from our nervous system that it's feeling threatened.
yeah,
And so when our nervous system feels threatened, then it sends signals through our bodies so that we feel stressed, so that we take notice. If we don't take notice of that, that just builds and that turns into chronic disease and all sorts of issues in our life. So for me, the first step is just to stop and just feel and just take a moment just to bring ourselves into the present moment. And it's only from the present moment that we can both take a look at that radical ownership piece and say, okay, like what have I done? How have I chosen that's placed me in this situation? And then the self mastery piece is all about slowing down and just stopping and feeling. It's like, okay, what is my body telling me right now? My body's telling me I'm stressed. So what do I need to do? I need to slow down. I need to sit. I need to breathe. If I slow my breath down, well, I'm going to help my nervous system understand that no, actually everything's safe. This piece around radical ownership is, we're continually creating over and over and over traumatic experiences of our past that are unhealed. Only
yes.
way that we can get out of those patterns is if we're willing to take a look at it and to heal the unhealed wounds within us. And so the only way from my perspective to do that is to really dive in and do that work and develop that relationship with breath, with the nervous system, with our emotions, and just recognize that these are all signals and all opportunities. to really slow down. And for me, in that slowing down, we're creating space. We're creating space so that we can choose differently. So maybe somebody is feeling stressful in their relationship because their partner did something. So tendency is to react as they always have in the past. You know, maybe they lash out at their partner, they yell at their partner. And it's like, well, what's that going to create? Like more of the same, just this perpetuating cycle,
Yeah,
perpetuating pattern. So their partner makes them angry, makes them feel angry. So what happens if we just stop for a moment and feel that anger and
yeah,
just let it move, connect to our breath, connect to the present moment, create a little bit of space so that we're not reacting and that we can learn to respond, to have choice. It's like, oh, okay, actually, I get to choose in this moment. Do I
yeah,
want to yell at my girlfriend
yeah,
or do I want to just say, actually, I just need to go for a walk right now? Well,
yeah,
that completely changes the course of our life. It's two completely different trajectories.
yeah, yeah,
And taking that space is gives us the opportunity to choose a new life. But we need to learn to stop, be able to reflect, and we need to be able to feel. The reason why people are running from their problems is because they're scared to feel,
yeah,
right? It's simple. You know, people don't want to feel, and it's understandable. That's why it was traumatic, is because it was more than you thought you were able to feel. And so it
yes,
creates this pattern. And until we're willing to face that and confront it, it's just going to keep showing up again and again and again in our life.
yeah. And people keep repeating the cycle.
Yeah,
Yeah,
for generations, you know,
yeah,
and then we are where we're at right now.
yeah, yeah, definitely. And it makes perfect sense what you're saying. And I teach clients when with like CBT, take a breath, reduce your heart rate, start bringing your anxiety down. So I do similar there as well because it makes a difference. If somebody's stressed or anxious, my rule of thumb is breathing exercises. Start with breathing exercises. And you're so right about if you can take a breath, take a step back, then you might not react to something. You've got time to think about it. And if you do go for that walk, that's going to diffuse it because you're more likely to be calmer when you come back than what you would do if you just
Mhm.
reacted. And then obviously somebody's partner's reacted, and then it's just going to go off and just expand and get worse and worse. So it makes perfect sense. When did you decide that you wanted to um, help other people? Was it kind of stumbled into it doing a yoga class and then on, or was it always in your mind that you wanted to do retreats and help other people?
I think it came in actually a long time before yoga did, and I felt like I had always been struggling through my childhood, my teens, my 20s, and really all I ever wanted, even though I was, you know, seeking success and, you know, the big house and the fancy cars and all those things, there is an underlying piece that it just recognized that really all I wanted was to be happy.
Yeah,
And something in the world didn't make sense to me. It was like, you know, like, why is there all this suffering? You know, why is there all this trauma and abuse and, you know, excuse my language, but fucked
go
up
for it.
shit happening in the world? And it
100%.
just felt like there was a deep sense that, you know, like, not only do I want to be happy, but I would love to make the world a happier place
Yeah,
and help other people. You know, the worse my life got, the more I got into addiction and incarceration. It was just like, I don't want other people to have to go through this. Like, how can I help other people so that they recognize earlier on that you
yeah,
don't need to go to prison in Mexico before you turn your life around. Like,
Yeah.
let's just
Yeah.
take a minute right now. And because I think that's the thing people don't understand is if we're in a negative mindset and if we're not taking radical ownership, it can always get worse.
Yeah.
And we will continue to make it worse and worse and worse and worse until we wind up in an 11-foot by 11-foot jail cell in Mexico with 30 other men. And it's like, holy shit, again, like, what have I created? And I think the other thing that people don't understand when they're really stuck in their struggles and their challenges, like if people are listening and it feels really hard right now, is that it can get infinitely better. Like it can get so good. Life can be so good. And it doesn't matter where people are at right now. That I believe for everybody that we all have the potential to create a really happy, joyful, peaceful life. And so we can kind of, again, it's kind of like the tricks of our mind. We can think it's so bad, it's so hard. There's this part that just loves being the victim. And
Yeah.
it's
Oh,
like,
it's
well,
easy. Yeah.
stay with that and you'll see how hard it can be.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
is that what you want?
Yeah. Without doubt, because yeah, some people want to sit in their misery, they haven't got the guts to do it. But the people that decide that they want to make a change, especially when they see the results starting to come in, like when somebody starts training and working out at the gym and they start losing weight, they start putting muscle on, it's starting to look good. They got a bit of momentum there as well. And if they maintain the consistency, then they're going to get their results there as well. With yourself, though,
Mhm.
um, how much fulfillment did you get in not only your journey that's gone from one extreme to the other, but you can actually clearly see, and I know so as being a therapist, that you're actually making a positive difference to other people's lives.
Yeah, that feels meaningful
Yeah,
because I know that those people go back into their lives and their relationships and their families and their communities and I see the exponential potential that lies within that. And so I get a lot of fulfillment and a deep sense of meaning by being able to really be with people in their journey
yeah,
and help walk them or walk with them through that
yeah,
transformation is to me that's what we're here for is to be in service to other people in service to life. But first we got to sort our own shit out, and that's a part that sometimes
yeah,
that helping other people can be actually a distraction from doing our own work. So
yeah.
my recommendation is do your own work first, and
It's
then when
yeah,
you're in a place,
yeah.
then start helping other people and maybe help people along the way, but don't let it be a distraction.
Exactly, and I say that to people all the time. You start with yourself. If you, whether it's a client that's burnt out because they're too busy doing everything, they always put myself last. I'm like, well, how do you feel? Well, I feel terrible. Well, what do you expect? You actually put yourself first, and that's not selfish. If you put yourself first, you're going to look after yourself, and then you're in a better position to help other people. But a lot of people just kind of miss that there as well. It's so important, and it's not selfish there as well. Um, what's next for yourself then? Because obviously what you're doing is growing and growing and it looks amazing. Videos are brilliant on your Instagram. What's next for yourself?
More of the same, and yet in making that full circle journey and coming back to the place that I left 20 years ago, there's a real rooting and grounding that's happening here and a deep desire to really create from the space that I'm in right now and within that, really wanting to recreate some of the things that I put out in the past. So I'm in the process of going back through and recreating some of the courses that I've been offering for years, and giving them a tune up and a new perspective. And so working on that, I've got a course coming out in the fall, which is the first one that I created, which was the breathwork blueprint. It was that first one to really weave together all these pieces of the different worlds of breathwork and nervous system regulation, and how all those pieces tied together in really simple and practical ways for people. And then I'll be doing the second course I created this winter, which is Awaken Self-Leadership, which is really getting into all these pieces of mind and beliefs and emotions, and understanding how these literally create the world that we experience, and getting into the quantum reality that's so irrefutably proven, and yet
Yeah,
we seem to have such a resistance to actually embracing that. So that's another really great course that I'm super excited to go back through and to bring a fresh perspective to. And then I've been leading the 1 year training cohorts over the last few years. I took a year off of that this year, and I'll be coming back next June with a 3 year program, which is it's a little bit more than a training program, and it's more of an initiation, but really wanting to focus on activating conscious embodied leaders, and really spending the time with people to walk alongside people in really becoming those transformational leaders in the world. So
yeah,
that's what's coming up for me. Maybe building a retreat center, in between all those things.
yeah.
And yeah,
There's a lot there. It all sounds great. Um, I love what you do. It's so fascinating. It's so interesting because there's so much that I know some of it, but it's so nice to hear all these things that you do. And when you explain it, it all makes perfect sense. There's nothing confusing about it. It's kind of obvious, but you're right. It's like, why don't many people do this thing? If they not discovered it, do they not know it? So the fact that you're helping a lot of people and it spreads the word, and hopefully it starts growing, because breath work, just as a therapist, just like take a breath, it makes all of the difference. And that's just there's going to do like the 4 second 4-4-4 technique or whatever, something basic like that. So
yeah,
with yourself putting on another level there, the difference it's going to make to people's lives, it's just brilliant. And obviously, look what it's done for yourself there. So I think it's just amazing what you've done, and it's just so interesting. And all of your information and links will be in the description there as well, for people to click on there and search you out, and book some retreats and courses with yourself there as well. So Jeff, thank you
yeah.
so much for coming on. It's been amazing.
You're so welcome. And I think it's worth reiterating that last point that you made, is that we can want it. There's a part of us that can want it to be really complicated,
Yeah,
and it's really incredibly simple. And
yeah,
it's just about slowing down, breathing, feeling. And it doesn't matter where you're at, it can always get better. So
yeah, yeah. Yes,
yeah,
it can. Yeah, and you're
so
living proof of that, because
absolutely.
you're at a point where I'm listening to your story and I'm like, how can it get any worse? And yet you've made it get better, you know? So
Yeah,
that's a long road back, and yet you've done it, and look where you are now. And it's like it's another life for you, you know?
absolutely. Fresh start. And yeah, I feel like everybody has that potential. So really
Yeah.
encourage people, if they are struggling, is just know that it can get better, and do the things that you need to do in order to change the course of our lives. And I've got a really simple freebie on the website, which is called Reclaim Your Freedom. And if people go to the Breath Army website, they can find that. It's a simple 50-minute workshop. Gives some really good practices that are the foundation of everything I do and teach. And again, they're simple, they're easy, they're practical.
Yeah,
And, if we do those simple things over and over again, we can be amazed at how much our life will change.
exactly. Keep it simple and do it consistently, and that'll get you a big improvement in life, and something simple like that consistently makes a massive difference. So definitely, and like I said, the website that'll be included in the description as well there. But Jeff,
Right on.
absolutely brilliant. Thank you again for your time.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Lee. Really nice to chat with you. And thanks to anybody who's still listening for being here with us on the journey.
Thank you.